unanimous decision to stay out indefinitely will again bring all freight and passenger services in the Hunter Valley to a standstill. The dispute over manning changes has so far cost 34 days of stoppages in the past 4 months. The latest strike follows a decision in the Arbitration Commission to reject an application by the AFULE to defer the date for the introduction of two-man crews from February 1st for 1 month.
When you come into a commission with an endorsement by the Premier and the State Rail Authority not to oppose a deferment, it's usual practice that you gain that deferment.
The latest dispute will hit the coal industry at a particularly vulnerable time.
We're looking at the moment of a forward stem of ships beginning next week of something in the order of 7.3 million tonnes between next week and the end of March, which means we're going to have to shift about 100,000 tonnes a day average, which is right up at the peak of the capacity of the whole coal chain. That's it with rail services running.
Not only are they just
beginning next week
of
something in the order of 7.3 million tonnes between next week and the end of March, which means we're going to have to shift about 100,000 tonnes a day average, which is right up at the peak of the capacity of the whole coal chain. That's it with rail services running.
I think it's probably more imperative in the Hunter because in spite of the fact that we are 16% non-Anglo Celtic origin, which doesn't show up in the statistics, it's mostly second and third generation where the culture persists and where most people are unaware of it in the Hunter, and so that you can't go into a school, you can't go into a hospital or anywhere without recognising that we are truly a multicultural Australia and a multicultural Hunter Valley, and yet our services and the way we approach life has not actually recognised that. We're still operating in a monocultural sense in a multicultural environment. Now in Sydney it's so obvious that everybody knows it's so, but here in the Hunter Valley and in the Upper Hunter as well, not only the Lower Hunter, people tend to forget it because people are second generation and they sound like Aussies, although culturally of course there is a wide variety.
What are the aims of the course?
The aims of the course are to promote understanding of the fact that Australia is a multicultural society and what that really means in day-to-day living. It's also aimed to increase the skills of professionals who are working, who have been trained generally in a monocultural sense and who are now working in Australia, and also to train those people who are working in ethnic affairs but haven't had any graduate sort of training. So it's intended to do a number of different things and to put people in contact with one another.
Oh.
Attended by union officials from Sydney, including the AFULE State President, Mr. Bruce Woods, the striking enginemen took only 3 hours before voting to stay out indefinitely.
There'll be no return to work till such times as sackings are withdrawn and all entitlements restored to all the enginemen in the Hunter Valley and other depots that have had sackings commenced against them.
Does this mean drivers statewide will stay out?
The governing body of the council has been called
Control officer, Mr. W.
The district agronomist is the in-between man between research with the Department of Agriculture and the prime producer. He advises the prime producers on any agronomic problems they might have or advice they require.
Now, you've got a particular interest in winter wheats. Why is that?
I think they've got a place in the valley. I'd like to assess that potential. They're a wheat as opposed to a spring wheat that's been grown in the past, and they can be grazed and then get a grain yield off them as well, which they can use to supplement their beef enterprise.
Do you think that local farmers have to look at new crops like winter wheat to improve their income?
To a certain extent, although most of the emphasis should be on improving what they're doing presently, with regards changing their varieties of, say, ryegrass or maize production, weed control, fertiliser usage, those sort of strategies.
Members of the Union Divisional Council attended the meeting.
Today's talk. They're meeting AMA.
Secret government offer to end the pollution crisis.
Reinstated without loss of privileges, and agreement be reached that the second person on a locomotive be trained to be a driver. According to Union Trade Secretary Mr. Bruce Wood, it was reported to the meeting that the SRA is processing further settings of amendments to take place today. Adopted by the Minister for Industrial Relations, Mr. Willis, on Wednesday night. And that is due to go before the full bench of the
And Cameraman Creek.
last night, and they would not be attending.
The Newcastle manager for the New South Wales Coal Association, Mr Rod Harrison, says because over 60% of the state's export coal passes through Newcastle, the current dispute can only be described as a state and national problem. Mr Harrison says if it's goodbye to Newcastle, it's also goodbye to the rest of New South Wales. The chairman of the Port of Newcastle Task Force and the Hunter Development Board, Mr Alex Young, supports Mr Harrison's view.
Do you think Newcastle is washed up as a result of this dispute?
No, not at any price. I think really what is happening, and we must remember that Newcastle will always be an area in which industrial problems can occur. It's an industrial city. Now on that basis, what's happening at the moment is a real challenge to us to come forth with a better structure to handle this sort of thing. And you know, it has been done. We're doing it at the dockyard, we're doing it in other places, and we need to apply the same principle to the coal chain.
What does the task force think needs to be done?
Firstly, we believe the men should go back to work immediately so that we can have an opportunity of settling back and reviewing the situation. Secondly, we believe there should be a cooling off period to give an opportunity of negotiation so that the whole situation can be reviewed. And thirdly, we believe that that cooling off period should possibly involve a situation in which lay people at a much lower level should be given an opportunity to sit down with the unions involved around a table and try and solve what has become a very complex problem.
The Managing Director of Carrington Slipways, Mr Don Laverick, also believes Newcastle's prospects will survive the rail strike.
Newcastle is still a very vibrant city, and I think it's got some difficulties, but certainly from our industry standpoint, things look better this year than they have done for some time.
Has Carrington Slipways been affected by the rail dispute?
No, we're sorry to see what is happening for the coal producers because we know how important that is to the district, but it's not the first rail strike we've ever had or problems that we've had. And when you see record tonnages were shipped last year, I can't see that you can say that Newcastle is finished.
It was hoped hoped the statewide stoppage would be avoided following this morning's decision by the Arbitration Commission to delay the implementation date of two-man crewing on Hunter Valley coal trains for 6 weeks to March the 15th. But the state president of the AFULE, Mr Bruce Wood, said after the meeting an indefinite stoppage would take effect from midnight tonight.
They considered the proposal from the full bench, which was in line with what the Minister for Industrial Relations, Mr Willis, proposed on Wednesday evening, and there was no change to that, and the meeting of train drivers throughout New South Wales tomorrow will go ahead.
So will a statewide stoppage take effect at midnight tonight?
Well, unless there's some change in the position of the second man on a locomotive training to be a driver, at this late stage, most certainly yes.
How long will the stoppage last?
I've no idea, but the State Rail Authority's proposal for a 50-50 split has merely been postponed.
What's the next move for the AFULE?
The AFULE will be taking part in mass meetings throughout New South Wales tomorrow and will be attending an Australian Council meeting in Melbourne, possibly Monday or Tuesday.
Following this morning's Arbitration Commission hearing, the implementation date for two-man crewing has been deferred to March the 15th, yet you're still determined to go ahead with statewide stoppages.
Well, that's the problem. It's only been deferred, and the State Rail Authority's proposal of 50-50 still stands.
Is it fair to say, then, that this dispute won't be settled unless it's settled on the AFULE's terms?
No, not at all. We've been prepared to negotiate and have given ground on many occasions. But as to the training of the second person to be a driver, it's not one the AFULE can compromise on.
Will you be calling for national stoppages?
Well, we would be putting to Australian Council the position in New South Wales and would be putting to them support in whatever way they see fit.
What if moves are made to have your union deregistered?
Well, that will only bring another issue into the matter and will not deal with the reduced train manning and the second person training to be a driver. And there's been attempts by the authority on many occasions bringing into it side issues, and one was the sacking of locomotive enginemen, the accusations they earned up to $1,000 a week, and they're merely side issues, and it will not deal with the matter and resolve it and get a resumption to work.
Today, a special meeting for representatives of the coal industry was also held in Newcastle. It was attended by the Deputy Chief Executive of the State Rail Authority, Mr Ron Christie. He described the authority's current position in the dispute.
I wouldn't like to speculate on the end of the dispute. One would think that even if the AFULE got everything they wanted, we would still have a dispute with another union over the coverage of that union for the second person.
Is the SRA prepared to initiate deregistration proceedings against the union?
We've indicated publicly that yes, we are taking those steps. If the union continues to ignore directions of arbitration and directions to return to work on a basis worked out by the Arbitration Commission, then we cannot afford to sit idly by and see the economy of the state and the economy of the Hunter in particular and in Newcastle destroyed by this selfish action of a union that's trying to perpetuate 19th century conditions and practices.
Mr Christie also gave assurances to coal industry representatives that their efforts during the dispute are appreciated. Mr Bruce Thompson, the chairman of the New South Wales Coal Association, said the dispute spreading statewide won't necessarily make the situation in Newcastle any worse than it is at present.
Well, the dispute spreading statewide will be no worse for the Hunter Valley coal industry than it has been while it's been isolated to that part of the industry, unless, of course, the statewide spread causes the dispute to be prolonged.
What do you think of the efforts being made to shift coal by road?
I think the efforts that have been made have been highly successful and have been the result of a great deal of collaboration by a number of people, including the State Rail Authority, the coal industry, the Road Transport Association, the unions concerned, and the coal loading facilities.
So you think their efforts should be commended?
Yes, indeed. But it should be recognised that with the best will in the world, you can't put much more than 40,000 tonnes a day into the coal loading system, and that is less than half the amount required for this port to work at a viable level.
Model car clubs have come in Sydney as well as locally in the first official function of the Days Gone Club. The club was only formed in October last year, but already has members in Papua New Zealand, Ireland, Britain and the United States and Canada. Started by Mr. Rod Harrison of the Central Coast, the club is named after a brand started pioneering the game. Already the music cars have quality, some models picking up to $85. The running of the club and no one could resist the look of the model train set, complete with landscaping. And how the element and with only 1/3 of its collection. Mr. Martin Fisher of the Miner was also awarded with what is possibly the fastest model aeroplane helicopter on the street on the first inside the owner of the company. The Never Take Fence showed what they were made of and showed the people there the amount of talent in many of Newcastle's youth. Then it was time for the contest, and entrants were led onto the stage by members of the Cooks Hill Surf Lifesaving Club: Deborah Jorgensen, Lyndall Avery, Vicky Kelleher, Patrice Daniel Crook, Jodie Hill, Linda Hewing, Evelyn Janer, Melissa Priest, Catherine Gurnow, Vanessa Avery, Donna Smith and Karen Lee Webber all were vying for the chance to represent Newcastle. Tension among the girls mounted as the runner-ups were announced, Lyndall Avery and Linda Hewing. Then it was time for the winner, Patrice Daniel Cook, 20 years old, of New Lambton. Patrice was crowned by last Carolyn Andreessen and will take part in the final at Port Macquarie next Sunday.
New South Wales, staying at the Beachcomber, which is beautiful.
Mr. Robert Caldwell first put in a submission to the Hunter District Water Board, who owns the land, 2 years ago, after an announcement by them that they would lease part of their land for recreational purposes. The Minister for Natural Resources, Mrs. Janet Crozier, says the proposal has not yet been approved. However, 100 Merriweather residents met this morning to decide on a plan of action. They say they'll be doing everything in their power to stop the development going ahead. Spokesperson for the group, Mrs. Ruth Blanc, said the next move would be to send a delegation to the Hunter District Water Board.
We're making constructive representations to the concerned authorities on the behalf of the people that were here. We've now formed into a Merriweather Coastal Protection Group, and we will continue our protest against all commercial development in this area and any other reserve area.
One of the most frequent users of the area is the Newcastle Hang Gliding Club. President, Mr. Shane Duncan, says commercial development of the area would be a tragedy for them.
This is one of the safest sites on the New South Wales coast, and we use it for our intermediate training of the pilots and things like that, and it is very, very good, and we would hate to lose this site for that reason. And with hang gliding, our ideals are to leave things how they are and keep them natural, and that's how this place is, and it's a beautiful place to fly over, and we just want to see it stay how it is.
The French are attacking the Australian wine market with an influx of inexpensive Beaujolais, but here at Rothbury Estate they've decided to meet the invasion head-on.
The heritage grapes are being picked a little earlier this year to ensure their ripeness and freshness. Why, you may ask, when the Hunter is renowned for its rich red? Well, it's all part of the strategy to produce a Beaujolais to compete with the French product. The success of that wine on the Australian market has shown that consumers are changing their preferences. A growing number prefer the fruity, light-flavoured wine, and so in a bid to retain its share of the domestic market, Rothbury Estate has decided to meet the challenge. Winemaker David Lowe says it's taken 8 years of growing the grapes and experimenting with the product to reach this stage of full production, but he believes all the hard work will be worth it.
And how successful do you think you'll be?
I guess it's early to say for today's production, but from last year's production we've had tremendous success. The comparative tastings we've done have showed some considerable flavour development, very, very similar styles to the French Beaujolais, although not being French Beaujolais, of course. Nothing could be that. We wouldn't want to call it that. It's been very, very similar, and certainly the product have praised it for such. And I think this year it looks all right. I'm always anxious that we don't sort of give too much away about the quality in case something goes wrong. But today it looks great. Great weather, great picking, everything's going well.
It'll take about 2 months for the